Like most of you, I'm a funder. Many of you may know that, many of you may not, but I've been a member since 2003 with a small staffed foundation where I'm a co-trustee was endowed by a family friend upon her death. Along with my wife, we use a donor-advised fund and a checkbook for our personal philanthropy. Together, we're part of a giving circle, and I've also served as the trustee for several charitable trusts. So I want to take a few minutes and speak with you this morning wearing my funder hat. About a year ago, I met a fellow member, a gentleman named Miguel Milanes. He's a quiet, soft-spoken man, and I met him when we were putting together our Philanthropy Lessons video series. If you're not familiar with them, they were produced to encourage the sharing of ideas and techniques that promote openness in how we all practice our giving and our philanthropy. And during each of our plenary gatherings, as well as in a concurrent session on Tuesday, we're going to share excerpts from that series. On your table, you may have found, but they should be there, some cards. And I encourage you to use them to fill out and share your stories. And then bring them by our booth in the exhibit hall so we can share them with other members in the days and weeks and months ahead. But let's get back to Miguel. He spends time on the streets of Miami. He drives through neighborhoods. He sits in barbershops. He sits in laundromats. He looks, he listens, and he learns. Miguel Milanes is a funder, a grant maker, like most of you. But he embraces a style of philanthropy that focuses not on the organizations that he's funding, but on the people he's trying to help. Not on the organizations, but on the people. And despite his quiet nature, or frankly, maybe because of it, he really made a deep impression on me. Like him, we're all citizens in a country, a society, a world, where the divide between those who have and have not seems to grow wider every day. Sadly, integrity and honesty appear beyond the reach of so many in power, and reliance on things that can be measured cleanly and neatly are either taken as holy gospel, never to be questioned, or they're abandoned, discarded, without any regard for science, evidence, or fact. In the society that's rifled with issues that need addressing and problems that need real solutions, Miguel chooses not to view them with only his point of view sitting in his office reading grant applications, but rather from the perspective of the people that he's trying to help. Take a look.
I think the most effective and successful grants that we've ever made were the ones where I actually went out and to those communities, and not necessarily with that middleman, the nonprofit executive director, but I just went out on my own and said, let me take a look at that community that they're supposed to represent, that they're supposed to be helping, and let me just do a visit. Let me walk through those streets. Let me drive through those avenues, and let me just get a better feel for the folks that they're trying to help, and even just meet some of the folks. And as I have done in laundromats or barbershops, it's a different type of grant making. It's not the transactional, which we have done as well. We receive a grant application and review it, but it's not just writing a check to that organization, even though they have all the success measures of all the outcomes. It's really going to where they are, and not necessarily with them, because sometimes we get sort of filtered, nuanced answers. It's really meeting the people on the ground.
So if you believe, like I do, that our giving, our collective giving, our individual giving, is a strong thread in the fabric that holds our society together, and if you agree with me that we can make the world a better place, we really have to be willing to follow in Miguel's footsteps and meet people on the ground, to look, to listen, to learn, and we need to do it with some humility. I know from personal experience That's not easy. And a lot of times it's just plain uncomfortable. And a big part of why it's not easy is that more often than not, we're unwittingly blind to our own biases and prejudices. I know that I am. And I constantly have to work hard to acknowledge and try and overcome them. And it begins by recognizing myself, the self that defines me, really the self from before I became a funder. So I grew up in suburban Boston with two loving parents in a stable household. Both of my parents were college educated. They were both professionals. My mom was a librarian, my dad was a lawyer. My brothers and I went through a public school system that at the time was considered to be one of the best in the country. Our home had books on the shelves, and there was never a question about a good breakfast before school, dinner on the table, heat in the wintertime, or enrichment opportunities during the summer. I could ride my bike safely up the street, just lay it in front of a friend's house, and be assured it would be there when I came out an hour or two later. My parents were there with me and my brothers to take us to good doctors, and the water from the tap was both plentiful and present. So while not part of the 1%, I grew up and developed values in what I now appreciate was a privileged household. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm also white, and I'm also a male. That's part of who I am, part of my giving DNA. They form me, they permeate me. So when I became a foundation trustee, they were the same values that I naturally used to filter decisions. I mean, who wouldn't? It was the world I knew. But here's the catch. I was making decisions suddenly about programs for children in communities that were totally foreign to my background. I was making decisions about programs in Spanish Harlem in the South Bronx, in neighborhoods where I was the minority. And I continued to do that for a long time before I came to realize that my vision was not helping my focus. At times I was nearsighted and I was missing the obvious. And at others, I was farsighted, unconsciously looking beyond problems that were right in front of me. It's taken me time to learn that my work as a funder almost always requires corrective lenses. It requires constant work and self-reflection to recognize my own, your own biases, and humbly look, listen, and learn from the people I'm trying to serve, we're trying to serve. Different lenses help us recognize the diversity in our society and the inequity it often fuels. And I mean diversity in every sense of the word: racial, economic, educational, gender, religious, sexual, access to clean water, healthful food, good health care, and more. Today, I'm still haunted by the first time I met a family that had no books in its home. Not a single book. To me, that was incomprehensible. I really couldn't connect in my mind. I just could not relate. It was far away from that world in suburban Boston where I had grown up. Yet as striking as that moment was to my psyche, it apparently was not enough to cause me to fully open my eyes, open my ears, open my mind. As the story I'm about to share with you illustrates, it's a story that's truly haunted me for over a decade now. At the time, I was part of a team that chose not to fund a reading program. And as I recall, it was fundamentally a really solid program run by an established, well-run organization. But the decision makers, of which I was one, I was a big part of, looked at it through our own privileged lenses. And one of the big factors that influenced our decision not to provide funding was their choice of literature. I honestly don't recall exactly what the titles were, but suffice it to say that this program was using writings by Malcolm X and James Baldwin to try and reach kids and teach kids to read. And with our privileged lenses, we thought they should be reading Mark Twain or Louisa May Alcott, and we didn't fund them. I mean, I look in the mirror still and say, what the hell was I thinking? I proudly professed to my friends that, oh, I'm a foundation trustee, and we want to help kids learn to read. Yet in retrospect, I can't imagine being any more rude, patronizing, or inappropriate. And what makes it worse, what's really bothered me all these years, this decade now, is that I was so incredibly detached from the very people I was trying to help. Without question, I need to exhibit more of Miguel's approach and make understanding those I'm trying to serve a priority. This next line's not easy, but it's true. I'm genuinely ashamed of being part of that decision because it really highlighted my insensitivity. And at times, deep down inside, I felt something wasn't right, but I didn't have the guts, or I didn't want to recognize my inappropriate perspective. So my point is this. We need a strong understanding of the people we're affecting, the situations we're trying to impact. And to do that, we need to listen to all the voices that comprise that reality, their reality. That means actively listening to the ultimate populations we're trying to help, listening to all the perspectives that influence their world, not ours. So for me, because I fund early childhood education, that means listening to children, parents, caretakers, listening to classroom teachers, educational administrators, and social service agencies serving that particular community. It means seeking opinions from diverse voices, and not only diversity of titles or roles. These are not just boxes to check off on a list and say, oh, I talked to this person or that person, and therefore I'm okay. But diversity of ideas and approaches, including all generations, backgrounds, perspectives, and especially those that are unfamiliar, and especially even more so those that make us feel uncomfortable. As I first thought about what I might say to you this morning, I scribbled down, the world is changing. We're at a special moment in time, and somehow that would be justification for why we should change our habits. But you know, the more I thought about it, the world's always changing. As a nation, we've experienced civil war and civil disobedience. We've had exploration and exploitation. We've had financial booms. We've had depressing busts. We've been victors and victims, leaders and collaborators. Yet as philanthropists, as donors, those of us in this room, we're the constant force that has the freedom and the responsibility, okay? The freedom and the responsibility to work above and through the issues for the greater good, which is exactly why I feel, and hopefully you will too, that there is indeed a sense of urgency in terms of how we act. And so I pose a question to each of you to think about. Are you stepping up to meet the challenges? Are you willing to recognize your own self, acknowledge your own biases, seek a diversity of opinions and perspectives, and then persevere with the belief that a better world is indeed possible? Your presence here at the conference suggests you are committed and ready to do just that. For what each of us individually and all of us collectively can't be is silent, not in our words, not in our actions. We can't hide behind our inability to face our own blind spots and pretend we're addressing issues that ultimately affect all of us. 20 years ago, this organization began when our founders looked beyond blind spots and barriers for opportunities that met the needs of leanly staffed donors. And over time, they were joined by others, many of you in this room, all of you in this room. And they built this organization. For 2 decades, we've challenged ourselves to grow and respond to the world, ever-changing around us, and hopefully part of that change is because of all the great stuff that you guys do in your communities each and every day. We really should all be proud, but we should not be satisfied. Inequity in what we do and how we act is not really an option, nor is avoiding issues that make us uncomfortable. There's much to do. Time is fleeting. Miguel Milanes reminds us to not only invest in the community, but to be invested in the community. So as you move about the conference these next few days, challenge yourself to learn new things. Attend sessions out of your comfort or your knowledge zone. Talk not only to old friends and new acquaintances who think like you, but also those who question you as you question them in return. For some of you, it's going to be the first steps on the journey to new perspectives. For those already on the path, extend your hand, share your wisdom, and walk hand in hand. Guide each other. Connect with new ideas and resources, and become champions for the power your giving has when you focus on the change you want to make and not on yourself. That sharing is really the essence of our Exponent Philanthropy community.